Jonathan. What the fuck? I exclaimed, slowly turning to catch one final glimpse of the light before proceeding. Yet, all I saw was Jonathan standing there staring at me with that shit-eating grin. I jumped back, and a faint, eerie cackle escaped Jonathan's lips. A dry, unsettling laugh that made me uneasy. Not like, he might steal my wallet uneasy. More like, I don't want to be trapped in this confined space with him uneasy. What the hell are you laughing at? I asked, and as the words left my lips, I could swear I saw his eyes go completely black. The lights flicked on, revealing Jonathan standing near the light switch across the room. Startled, I turned my head back to the door, only to find no one standing between me and the steps. "You okay, man?" Jonathan asked. "Am I okay?" I shouted before walking over to him. "What the fuck was that all about? I'm sick of you laughing at me all the time. My head hurts, my hands cut up. I look like shit, and all you do is fucking laugh." I unleashed my pent-up anger. Jonathan raised his hands in defense, his face devoid of any smile. "Calm down. I have no idea what you're talking about." I pointed towards the doorway, popping up and trying to scare the shit out of me. That's what I'm talking about. Jonathan's eyes followed my finger, and then he looked back at me and I noticed his eyes widen slightly. "What?" I asked, confused. "Your head is bleeding pretty badly," Jonathan said. I raised my hand and felt the warm, familiar sensation of blood. "Just great," I muttered, bringing my hand down to examine the blood dripping from my fingers. "Maybe we should go." "You're not looking too good," Jonathan suggested. My eyes rolled, and I hissed. "I could say the same about you." I took a quick look around the fully finished basement, noting the dusty leather chairs, movie screen, and a large white dog statue that resembled something I'd find at my grandma's yard sale. Jonathan's gaze remained fixed on me until my head snapped to face him. He began walking down a hallway. "It's this way," he said. I felt kinda bad about snapping on him, but what was I to think? He had been acting weird the whole night. I placed my hand on my head, wincing at the sting as my finger brushed the wound. Clearly, I had hit my head harder than I had initially thought. "Sorry, man." I apologized as I caught up with Jonathan. He turned around, forcing a weak smile. "It's cool, man. I'd be pissed too, but I'm not trying to fuck with you. I heard the song and it was iconic," Jonathan shouted. The door swung open, revealing a room with a large glass window that offered a view into a booth equipped with a microphone and a guitar leaning in the corner. On our side of the glass, there was old-looking black equipment and large boxes that appeared to contain reels. The place was filled with an eerie stillness. I stepped into the room and ran my finger across the layer of dust. "This is insane," I muttered. "You haven't seen anything yet," Jonathan replied, rushing over to one of the black seats and examining the large control board with its array of buttons and levers. "Have you told Max?" I asked. He extended his hand, flicking a switch and turning a dial. The large reels began spinning, and a faint buzzing sound filled the air. I turned around, searching for the source of the noise, and noticed two large speakers mounted in the top corners of the room. "No, there's no service in this place," Jonathan responded. Panic swept over me as I spun around. No signal meant no calls or texts. I was in deep trouble if the coach tried to reach me. Worse yet, if my mom called the coach and he had to admit, well, I'm not entirely sure where he is. "I'm fucking." I tried to voice my frustration, but the words got stuck in my throat. My muscles tensed, and I felt the hairs on my body stand on end as my eyes registered what was before me. Bloody handprints slapped against the glass. But something had destroyed the control board, leaving it in shambles. Jonathan stood there grinning at me, but this time there was no mistaking it. His eyes were pitch black, and blood streamed from his mouth. He opened his lips, and a river of red cascaded down his shirt. "You want to see some real crazy shit?" he said, but it didn't sound like Jonathan. This voice was deep and twisted, unlike anyone I knew. It felt like a chorus of voices, an eerie symphony of whispers. But startled, I frantically moved backward and ended up tripping over my own 2 feet. As I struggled to regain my balance, Jonathan approached me. My heart raced and I screamed, "Get the fuck away from me!" My hands shot up, shielding myself from the macabre madness unfolding before my eyes. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jonathan asked, sounding genuinely concerned. I looked up, peering through my shaky fingers, and saw Jonathan standing there, his green eyes filled with worry. I glanced over at the glass window and found it pristine, devoid of any fingerprints. Jonathan loomed over me, wearing the same concerned expression my mother would have worn if I had lost my mind. "You okay?" he asked once again. I slapped my hands along the wall, using it as support to pull myself to my feet. Was I okay? Well, no. Aside from being beaten up, I was now hallucinating. I gazed down at my bloodied hand and shook my head. "Nah, I'm heading home," I stated, turning towards the door, but Jonathan quickly cut me off, standing in my way with his arms outstretched. "Hold up! Hold up!" he shouted. "What?" I said. "You need to hear this song, man. It's all set up, all I have to do is hit play," he insisted. I closed my eyes and let out a deep sigh before reluctantly saying, "Fine." As I reopened my eyes, Jonathan was back in the large black chair. I watched as his finger pressed a bright red button and a smoky voice emanated from the speakers. "Good or bad, whatever you may see, just remember it wasn't me. The devil made me do it," the voice declared, sending a chilling shiver down my spine. I couldn't swear that my heart stopped, but I know I held my breath as the voice continued. It was Alex Ryder, speaking to us from beyond the grave, and I loved every second of it. And just when I thought it couldn't get any better, the guitar kicked in and the song began. I saw the raven in the corner. Cross the road for the devil's daughter. Far more lost than you'll ever know. Don't look back. Just let your soul. Whispered the old man. And oh no. But then a chilling sound interrupted that epic moment. My heart truly stopped this time as I heard my phone ringing. Was it the coach, ready to tear me apart for not meeting him after his late-night snack? Or perhaps my mum wondering if I died before she could get the chance to kill me for making her worry. My hand instinctively reached for my pocket, pulling out the sleek cell phone. The pain in my chest eased as I saw Maxwell's name on the screen. I raised my index finger, feeling the sting in my hand as the tightened skin reminded me of the injury. I turned around and brought the phone to my ear. "Max, you won't believe this shit," I started, brimming with excitement. But Max's tone and his peculiar question cut my excitement short. "You've seen Jonathan?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. Before I could respond, Max continued. "His mom said he hasn't been home for 2 days. The cops think he ran away, but he wouldn't do that without telling us, right?" My head slowly turned to look over my shoulder at Jonathan, who was staring at me with an unsettling gaze. The song had come to a halt, and all I could hear was Max's voice on the line. "I don't know, man. Maybe we should go out looking for him?" "He's right here," I managed to say. "What? I can't hear you, man. You're breaking up," Max replied. I turned around, he's right. But before I could utter the last word, Jonathan snatched the phone from my ear and flung it across the room. I watched in disbelief as my once sleek and fancy phone crashed into the wall, shattering into pieces a hoe's dream of being a housewife. "What the hell, Jonathan?" I shouted. Jonathan glared at me, his eyes icy cold, piercing into the depths of my soul. He shook his head, and as if under his command, the cellar door slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. My head spun around to the sound, but all I could see was a dark abyss. When I turned back to face Jonathan, I stumbled back, and Jonathan laughed. "I brought you here to listen to the voice of a god, and you answer your fucking phone!" Jonathan bellowed, his voice filled with rage. I shook my head. I don't know how wide my eyes got, but I felt I couldn't open them any more if I pried them open with a crowbar. "Jonathan," I whispered, my hands trembling as they slowly rose in front of me. My heart pounded relentlessly, uncertainty coursing through my veins. "What did that fat fuck say? He told you I ran away from home? That my mom's worried? He's a fucking liar," Jonathan scoffed, shaking his head. "The fucker is just jealous that he isn't here." "Jonathan," I pleaded, my voice barely audible. Fear gripped me tightly, my senses on high alert. but I couldn't decipher the truth from the terrifying illusions playing before me. I told that fat boy to come with me, and he was all, "Nah, I can't." My dad would be pissed. Jonathan took a step closer, and I instinctively took a step back, retreating further into the darkness. But not you, Rich. I knew you wouldn't back down. You're my bro. Till the end, right? "Jonathan!" I screamed. "What?" he asked. "Behind you," I managed to breathe. Jonathan turned around cautiously, his eyes searching for the cause of my distress. Yet, like me, he wasn't prepared for what materialized before us. It stood there, shirtless and covered in blood, a gold-inverted crucifix hanging from its neck. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the gory veins dangling from its slashed wrists, pulsating wounds that spewed blood, creating a pool at our feet. It snapped its head back and black dreads cascaded down onto its body. "Good evening, Atlanta." It screamed into the air. "This can't be happening," I mumbled. Gradually, its head lowered, and a pair of hazel eyes locked with mine. In that chilling moment, I knew exactly who was turning my blood into a river of ice. It was Alex Ryder. Not quite alive, but definitely in person. He wasn't anything like I remembered, nothing like the poster that hung on my wall. His long, iconic dreadlocks resembled filthy, lifeless serpents hanging from his skull. His once vibrant brown skin now bore a dark, weathered umber shade, as if someone had tightly stretched it, causing cracks to ooze with blood. Alex's lips parted, and my heart threatened to burst from my chest as I heard him say, "There's always room for one more fan." The voice boomed with its characteristic stage presence, yet there was an eerie quality to it, a haunting essence that split my being into conflicting desire, to flee in terror or to follow him into the depths of hell. But when he spoke again, every fiber of my being screamed for run. "Always room for one more fan," he declared in that same demonic tone I had heard before. "Oh, fuck!" we screamed in unison, and I witnessed Jonathan darting towards the recording studio. My gaze broke away from Ryder's stare, and I sprinted after Jonathan. Whether it was fear or my baseball reflexes, I swiftly surpassed him, bursting through the open door and racing toward the one adjacent to the glass window. Without slowing down, I yanked the door open. I had no intention of ever looking back. Yet just then I heard it. "Help me!" Jonathan's scream pierced the air. I spun around to see Jonathan sprawled face down on the floor, his bloody fingers desperately clawing towards the sound room door. "Help me!" he pleaded once more. I sprinted back and grasped his hand, striving to lift him to his feet, both of us pushing through the pain of our blood-soaked palms. As I examined the cause of our struggle, I saw two thick, bloody veins wrapped around Jonathan's ankles. My gaze followed the horrifying trail these veins created until, once again, my eyes locked with Ryder's. "Come on, boys, let's get a little crazy," he bellowed. "Fuck, fuck, fuck," I shouted and broke my eyes away from whatever the hell Alex Ryder had become, and I pulled Jonathan, but for every inch I cleared, Ryder yanked us back towards him. Before we knew it, we were back at the studio door. I dropped Jonathan's bloody hands. "What the fuck?" Jonathan cried. I jumped over Jonathan's body and grabbed the door. "Show's over, you son of a bitch," I yelled, slamming the door shut on the thick veins, severing them in half. "Get the fuck up," I demanded, pulling Jonathan to his feet. Together, we rushed into the sound booth, slamming the door shut and locking it behind us. "What the fuck is going on?" Jonathan shouted. I was too busy scanning the room and having my internal panic attack to give a shit about him. "Alex Ryder is fucking trying to kill us. That's what's happening," I declared, my eyes scanning the room frantically. There were no ventilation ducts or secret escape routes like in the movies. "We're screwed," I hissed. "What?" "Alex Ryder is dead," Jonathan shouted. I spun around, my finger pointing towards the glass window. "Tell that to—" My words trailed off as my gaze met Ryder's grinning face on the other side. "Him," I muttered. Jonathan and I backed up, knocking over a microphone and a bar stool in the process. Ryder's hands softly touched the clean glass window, leaving bloody prints as he took his finger and started drawing a circle along the glass. I couldn't hear anything beyond the glass, but watching his silent laughter was enough to create a lifetime of therapy bills. What's he doing? I whispered. Go fucking ask him, Jonathan replied. Alex proceeded to draw 2 more bloody circles within the first one before taking a small step back. It's a Barzey, I said. My eyes went from the drawing to Ryder, who had his index and thumb out like a gun, mockingly aiming it at us. Then I heard a faint shattering sound. No, no, no! I shouted as the glass beneath the blood began to crack. Ryder lunged towards the glass, his head aimed directly at the bullseye, his bloody dreadlocks trailing behind him. In panic, I dropped to the floor, covering my head with my hands. My heart raced, and the throbbing pain in my hand and head intensified as I braced myself for the worst. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, causing me to jolt back, knocking over a white guitar that sat in the corner of the room. He's gone, Jonathan whispered softly, extending his hand towards me. I stared at his hand, noticing that something had completely torn off his fingernails. That was probably sticking up on the floor somewhere. I retreated until I could rely on the support of the wall to pull myself up. Where did he go? I asked, my eyes fixated on the perfectly intact glass window. I don't know, Jonathan replied. I rushed towards the door, my trembling hands struggling to unlock it. What are you doing? Jonathan asked. Getting the hell out of here. I bolted toward the studio door. My body came to a full stop as I stood there staring at the door for a moment. I glanced back at Jonathan, who had slowly made his way towards the door of the sound room. Taking a deep breath, I pulled open the door only to be greeted by an empty, dusty basement. The same sight we had seen before. Without wasting any time, we both sprinted towards the cellar door. My hand grasped the doorknob, but no matter how much I turned or pulled, the door remained stubbornly in place. Open the damn door, Rich, Jonathan shouted in frustration. I'm trying, I yelled back. Who's down there? A voice echoed from the top of the steps that led to the main floor of the mansion. Jonathan and I froze, exchanging uncertain glances. Hurry, before he comes back, the voice urged, its softness managing to offer a sliver of calm amidst the chaos. I darted towards the steps, but Jonathan's cold, bloodied hand caught hold of me. Where are you going? He asked. Tama? I wriggled free from his grip. I'm getting out of here, come on, I shouted. We don't know who the hell is up there, Jonathan protested. Well, we know who's down here, I said, and with that, we raced up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind us. Leaning against the door, I took a moment to catch my breath before turning to face a woman with long, black braids standing at the end of the hallway. Thank you, I said with relief in my voice. We have to hurry, she shouted. Her back was to us, but her voice seemed so familiar. How do we get out of this place? Jonathan asked. We ran down the hallway, but with each step we took it felt as if the journey was getting longer. I stopped in my tracks, watching in disbelief as the hallway seemed to stretch out endlessly. Then my gaze fell upon her. She donned cut-off Jane shorts that clung tightly to her black fishnet stockings. She had spiked bracelets, a metal chain for a belt, and a dirty white crop top that revealed a tattoo on her lower back. As I read the dark, curved letters, I realized why her voice was so familiar. Stamped on her back read, "Property of Alex." "Jonathan, it's Melody," I shouted. Melody spun around with crazy speed, her head snapping to the side with a loud crack. That's when I noticed the bedsheet noose she held in her hands. "Out?" she hissed. The white noose slowly came up into Jonathan's view, and I watched as he froze in terror. "There's only one way out," she screamed, flinging the noose around her own neck. Her icy brown eyes locked onto me, and a sinister smile spread across her face. This was the third time I locked eyes with death. Melody tugged on the rope. "Going up," she taunted. We witnessed in horror as her neck snapped and the noose yanked her body into the air. Her legs thrashed and her body convulsed until she disappeared from our sight. "Oh shit!" Jonathan shouted before darting down another hallway. This had to be a nightmare, I told myself. It was the only explanation for the horrors we were experiencing. My heart tightened within my chest, and I placed a trembling hand over it, gripping. If I were a few years older, I might have thought the sharp jolts of pain meant I was having a heart attack. Maybe I was. "Jonathan!" I called out as I turned the corner, realizing he hadn't gotten too far. Jonathan stood completely motionless near the end of a staircase. Not even his chest was moving. It was as if he had forgotten how to breathe. "Jonathan," I whispered, slowly approaching him. When I reached his side, I understood what kept him frozen in place. There was a lifeless body lying in a pool of blood by the front door. "That's why the door wouldn't open," Jonathan whispered. I began walking towards the body, but Jonathan's hand tightened on my shoulder. "Don't! It could be them messing with us again," he warned. Nevertheless, I continued my approach, sensing that this body was different from Ryder or Melody. It appeared smaller and still. As I drew closer, my hand covered my nose. I gagged at the putrid stench of rotten, decaying flesh. "Call the police," I whispered urgently. What?" Jonathan asked, confused. "What?" I turned back and shouted, "Call the police!" "I can't," he replied softly. "You can still call 911 without service, Jonathan," he hissed, frustration seeping into my voice. I knelt down. The blood stained what was left of my white uniform. This body was new. This one didn't belong here with whatever was chasing us through this mansion of hell. I placed my hand on its shoulder and gently turned it over. As the body tumbled, I fell backward, landing on my rear. The eyes were missing, brutally gouged out with something sharp and jagged. The mouth was frozen open in a scream. Despite the grotesque face, I recognized who it was. Then "Jonathan," I said, puzzled. "I can't let you leave, Rich," a demonic voice echoed from behind me. Slowly, I turned my head to glance over my shoulder. A pale, black-eyed Jonathan grinned menacingly at me. "You've got to stay and party with us. He shouted. Jonathan was dead. He had been dead for days now, and this abomination had tricked me into entering this house of horrors. It played me like a goddamn Game Boy. Leaping over Jonathan's lifeless body, I reached for the door, desperate to escape. "Where are you going, Rich?" the demonic voice bellowed. I refused to look back. I couldn't look back. This was my chance to break free. Kicking Jonathan's body aside, I yanked the door open. "You ready to rock?" Ryder screamed. I found myself face to face with pure evil. Staring into those abyss-like black eyes, I felt the presence of the devil himself. Fear and panic coursed through my veins, but before I could run or scream, Ryder rammed the spiked neck of his guitar into my chest, hoisting my body into the air. "There's always room for one more," he screeched. "Amnesty." The city didn't go into much of a panic over our disappearance. Kids went missing every day. Most people believed Coach was involved. So when they arrested him, everyone thought that was the end. Open and shut case, just how Atlanta likes them. No one paid attention to Max when he claimed to have spoken to me or that Jonathan had invited him to explore Ryder's old mansion. Nobody listened. So Max, being the loyal friend he was, came looking for us. "What are you doing here, Max?" I whispered from the mansion's top window. "How the fuck did his fat ass get over that gate?" Jonathan asked. He picked the lock. Melody replied softly. "Smart," Jonathan and I said simultaneously. "Well, let's go greet him," Jonathan declared, turning away from the window and venturing further into the darkness of the room. Melody slowly followed behind him. Meanwhile, I remained fixated on Max, who was slowly making his way up the stone steps. "We don't have to. We can just pretend we didn't see him," I whispered. Suddenly, I felt a hand rest on my shoulder. "That would be rude," Ryder said, leaning in close. Our eyes, black and intense, locked as he grinned. "Besides, there's always room for one more fan."